Oh my goodness. How is everybody doing? Having a great day today. So, let's see, what can we do today? Just got done with an echelon of beta reads. So many beta reads. And now I got a whole new slew of order. At this point, I've gotten to the past the 100 mark. Well past the 100 mark of amateur manuscripts I've seen. So, with the last echelon, I just was like, we haven't done a video in a while. So why don't we just do a video on some things that I've noticed in this past slew of beta reads, as well as just generally speaking. Michael Masato, beta reader, author, ghostwriter, editor. Whoa. And I've written a few books myself. Links will be in the description. Bright Dreadful Sun is somewhere, but yeah, here you go. Boom. And nice. So I know the struggles. And me as a beta reader, I try to, what's the word here? I try to give people the value that I would want as an author. So I definitely go ham each and every single beta read. And one of these days, my eyes are going to pop out my socket from reading so much. But anyways, so what are we going to do today? I've got a list here. Whoa. Of some of the things, not all of the things, but some of the things that I kind of comment on towards the end. If you haven't seen the channel, this is kind of like a writing advice channel. Also, I do music. But the difference between my channel and a little bit of other people's channels is I put the focus on psychology. Psychology is definitely very important when it comes to writing. And arguably, sometimes people could say that, hey, psychology is more important than taking creative writing classes, for example. Because sometimes people don't know how to apply it. But when you know psychology, it applies to a lot of different things. Anyways, so with that being said, yeah, I definitely take that approach. Psychology has definitely helped me in many aspects. And when I take my beta reading and when I do my writing, especially my ghost writing and my personal writing as well, I'm always focusing on how the mind can interpret it in a more effective way. So that is, the approach I take. So, well, first thing, I kind of definitely immediately, first sentence, first page, first chapter, all this stuff, even for first paragraph, I start to notice presentation, because that is one thing that is seriously, you could just kind of just glance at something and see how the presentation is, how your paragraphs are formatted, how your lines, your spacing, your stylizing, all these different things that come into play. Now, what do I want to say about this from a neuropsychological perspective? Very simply put, the mind, the brain, the way it interprets things, the way it interprets images, visualizations, and whatnots. It loves symmetry. Oh my goodness. The brain is in love with symmetry. It disdains asymmetry without deviation. So when you're writing and you're having this jagged, kind of like choppy presentation, it makes for a very jagged read. It makes for a very not concise read. If you read Tolkien, beautiful presentation. If you read Martin, beautiful presentation. And there's different styles, so like if you look at Rowling books, her presentation can get very jagged, but what does she do that's so awesome is very conservative with the dialogue and certain terms, but the stylizing, she's really good at stylizing. So these are all different things that can kind of really make things pop. I love receiving manuscripts that already have like beautiful stylizing in it, but when I receive a manuscript with this just askew presentation, or rather, when I receive a manuscript that has this pristine presentation, it shows the author cares. And, somebody in my position, somebody, in the industry, when we get these, we fall in love. That's already just getting off on the right foot. So, with that being said, just keep that in mind with your writing. Not everything has to be like a cookie cutter kind of thing, but at the same time, keep in mind that the mind loves symmetry. So, this is something you should be doing when you're working on your presentation. Anything from dialogue, even if you would like take a formulaic approach to writing, like I kind of do, that could definitely help. So with that being said, focus on your presentation. Very important, very important. The next thing, genre, as you guys know, I did in the last video, the Cookie Cutter Kingdom video. Genre, we have a lot of fusion, confusion, as well as an influx of, let's say, fantasy. A lot of these authors are doing the Game of Thrones thing. I receive literally like 3-4 of those manuscripts a week. It's like crazy how many of these Game of Thrones Kingdom novels I get. So with that being said, a lot of authors, they send it to me and they think they're the only one doing it, which is kind of odd. And I'm glad people hire me for these sort of things, because they're like, wait, what? A lot of people are doing this? Yeah, a lot of people are writing the Game of Thrones style. Very popular, on one hand. it's best maybe not to reinvent the wheel too much. It still moves. If it works, it works. But at the same time, you don't want to reinvent the wheel too much on the other hand, so your cart doesn't move at all. But that being said, so like I said, similar to the mind enjoying symmetry, the mind also enjoys predictability. The mind it loves solving problems at times, but at the same times, for convenience sake, the brain loves to make shortcuts. That is literally what our brain is built on. The neurological structure, we are programmed to shortcut. We use associations. So when we're using comparative associations, especially when it comes to genre, you want to be very careful. Okay, for two things. Number one, fusion confusion, which is, in my opinion, just so off. Yeah, fusion confusion is basically when you start doing like it's not multi-genre necessarily. Like, let's say you're doing a sci-fi fantasy. That's not necessarily what I mean, because here's kind of the components to that. It's not knowing how to write one element or not knowing how to write several elements and then just kind of smashing them together, even making it kind of like even more confusing than it needs to be. So let's say if you're writing a fantasy with romantic subplots or romantic aspects to it, you want to know how to write a beautiful romance and you want to know how to write a beautiful fantasy. You don't want to have know how to write a okay fantasy and then a horrible romance, or maybe sci-fi and fantasy. I firmly believe that you should understand the concepts of science fiction first, as well as fantasy. You want to be able to write both independently, and then bam. Same thing goes with cuisine. Like a lot of times when I do my beta reading, I'm constantly referring to food and music and all these odd comparisons. But yeah, if you look at cuisine, fusion cuisine, you know how to cook one. You know how to cook Spanish, and you know how to cook Asian. You mix them together, you get me. Oh my goodness. You mix them together, and you gotta know how to cook both. You can't just know how to cook a steak and then give them raw potatoes. You gotta understand how to cook all the elements. So fusion confusion is basically when there's too much going on, a lot of confusion, and not necessarily being able to stand on legs. You could crash a novel. So you want to watch out for fusion confusion. You don't want to incorporate too many elements, especially if the mind is kind of like, what the heck is all going on? You want to kind of focus on understanding how to write each component. Especially like as a dish, you want to be able to cook each component individually. Characters, so many different types of characters. With that being said, I am a fan of, especially with fantasy fiction, they tend to have this echelon of characters. It just keeps flooding in. This is probably going to be like a 14-part video because I could just talk about this stuff forever. I tend to rant. But with that being said, archetypal characters. This is why I prefer, even in fantasy, I prefer a lesser character count, especially once they start all coming at you. Foreign names. In fantasy, science fiction, our goal is to make the foreign feel familiar. Okay, we want to put people in this odd world and want to make them feel like they belong there. So when you have like Zidion, Shabigion, like it's just a bunch of nonsense for names, there are two things. Sometimes there's a rhyme or reason to it, and I love that when it's like a little bit deeper in the level. Like maybe I took Latin and kind of flipped the words around, or maybe I took something, and that's awesome. I like when people take reference to something and they just kind of mold it to something new. But when you have it sounds cool. That's what drives me nuts is like, you just start making up random things out of nowhere. I don't like that when it comes to characters. Archetypal characters, if you look at Carl Jung, that's a great, I have the video on Carl Jung's archetypes. Very cool. So with that being said, when you're looking at archetypal characters, there's a difference between Jungian archetypes and literary archetypes. A little bit different, but very similar at the same time. So when we're using Jungian archetypes, we're using them to document personality. And there's applicable literary comparisons. But so let's say if you're a hero, the hero Jungian archetype is different than the hero literary archetype. The hero archetype focuses on mastery, like me. Like I consider myself the hero archetype because I'm trying to always learn something new. I always want to push myself to the limit. That's a hero archetype. Same with the ruler archetype that wants control. That's not necessarily a literary thing where it's like a ruler wants to be a king and then, a little different. I prefer Jungian archetypes over literary archetypal, how can I say this? Literary archetypes that are predisposed to being confusing, because not everybody understands it. So when you write with Jungian archetypes, when you write with a psychological approach, you start humanizing your characters very well. And once you understand psychology, then you could really kind of put that into it. So when you're introducing a bunch of strangers, they become what's called silhouette characters. And how many times have this happened even to the main character where it's just silhouette characters? It's just so much. You don't know what they look like. I like to say you should describe them to the point where you'd be able to recognize them on the street, you know? And that can happen on so many different levels, from nonverbals to character appearances. And don't forget reiterations. Like, you know, especially the most important characters. You want to reiterate, not constantly, consistently, and, you know, somewhat sparingly at the same time. You want to have that balance. Writing is a lot about balance. It's a lot about humanization at times, too. We want them to have that memorability. And when there's so many characters, that memorability gets lost fast. And antagonists, you know, a big thing that I see a lot is a lack of clear antagonists. Like sometimes the whole story doesn't have an antagonist, and when it comes to fantasy fiction, you just all fiction in general, you want an antagonist. That's textbook. That should be elevated. So if your novel is lacking a memorable, relatable antagonist, and if it's not present, then what are you doing? You know what I mean? You got to get that going, you know. I'm already ranting. Let me finish the video, and then maybe I'll probably do another one. We'll see. Magic system. That's something I comment on too, especially when I receive. Sometimes I like to mix magic system with weapon system. It's kind of my, depending on what kind of fiction I'm receiving. But anyways, magic system. So one thing that magic system should definitely have is drawbacks. That's something that can sometimes just completely go out the window. You want to have drawbacks. Look at the best magic systems of all time. They all have drawbacks. That is also textbook. Let's say if you're a bodybuilder, you know, you have a limit. You can't just keep doing it. Your body will get hurt. So that's something you can compare. You can't cook a dish over and over and over. It's going to get burned. So with that being said, it's the same thing that goes with the magic system. You want to have drawbacks to add that drama, to add that tension. But also at the same time, you want to have ways to improve them too. That's really cool. And I love when I get a fantasy fiction that has a magic system. I'll say that slow for you. Magic system, not just magic, blah, 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 blah. Magic is there, there's a magic system. No, not necessarily. Look at the best magic systems. Take that word and put it in your brain, magic system. Okay, you want systemic plot. Okay, wow. There's so many different types of plots. There's the 3-act structure, hero's journey. That's, for example, I recommend reading the book 20 Master Plots, like especially if you're trying to construct like metamorphosis plots or riddle plots or all these different things. You want to understand that the mind also wants to compare. You know, we want to put ourselves in situations where we've been similarly to this, as well as kind of see what we can take away from this and apply. You know, you want to make your writing applicable to everyday life to an extent. So with that being said, you want to read a character that really resonates with somebody, and now they can kind of relate to them, bring them out, and really see that character within themselves. So when you got this odd, askew plot structure, it doesn't leave that. And here's one of the big things that I see all the time is, this is the weird plot structure. Introduction, non-clear inciting incident. Like, it's just like, what happened? Massive rising action, just this huge rising action. It's like a skateboard ramp. Huge rising action, and then sometimes the climax falls short. But here's the thing. You want to have fulfilling falling action. Okay, you want fulfilling falling action. Some people just rising action, teeny tiny climax, ends. You know, that's very common in amateur manuscripts, is not understanding simple plot structure. So with that being said, definitely study them. Like I said, I recommend 20 Master Plots. If you want to get a beta read from me, I'll definitely go into that. You know, I'll probably give you guys some exercises, which is something I've been doing with the beta reads. I want to wrap this video up, though. I don't want to drag too long and go crazy. But yeah, with that being said, understand your plot structures. Understand your acts. Understand your intensifications, your reprieves. Understand where tension goes. You don't want one long reprieve. You want to have that balance, okay? You want to ebb and flow. You don't want this massive tidal wave, and you don't want still water either. Writing, like I said, is a lot about balance. You want a nice, beautiful skim. Okay, you know, that goes with presentation as well. You want to have that beautiful skimming reading effect where you can absorb the information but also glide beautifully. You don't want the jagged, you know, kind of, you know, you don't want your eyes to go like this. No, when you're learning speed reading, for example, they teach you what's called chunking. Very cool. Very important for beta readers, by the way. You got to understand chunking and how that works, but that could be a whole different thing. Pacing. Oh, there you go. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. Pacing. That's something new I've been starting to comment on. That's like a new category. Like on my lists, I have like this massive category kind of organization thing. Anyway, so pacing, you know, simply put, there's different types of pacing. Like me, I talk fast. You know, so if I was a character in a novel, you would be throwing my nonverbals left and right. You would be putting like the speed of my pacing, and you know, at the same time, you could use that. You could establish a baseline, and then once that pacing is deviating from a character, let's say the main character is me. Like, let's say I'm like talking all the time, blah, 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 that's my baseline. But then one day you see me, I'm like, hey, what's up? Now you know something is wrong, and that shows through subtext. So with that being said, once your characters have these baselines, once you establish relatable, memorable, and identifiable baselines for on multiple levels, all these things, then you could start elevating and start really playing with the mind. I have I have a hypnotherapy license. So that can go into writing too, and that happens a lot in pacing. If you stay to the end of this video, this can be very helpful. Because when it comes to pacing, you want to use choice words. They want really subtle. Hypnotherapy, for example, is a lot about choice subtlety, okay? And then it's pretty interesting because when you're using this choice subtlety, you want them to forget that subtlety. That's the trick between hypnosis. You want to put them in this state and then forget they're in there. You know, it's like you want to put them in and then make them forget they're even in there. I could go with setting too. I miss setting, but anyways. Yeah, let's double back to settings. Setting, with that being said, know how to allocate your word count. Know your real estate. You know, like if you're going to put a massive real estate word count on setting, use that for these other elements. You don't want to have like elevated setting and then nothing else elevated. You don't want to have elevated characters only and then you neglect setting. It all has to work together. It's like kind of like a delicious buffet as opposed to a nasty buffet. I like to compare it to 5-star dishes, actually. It's a little bit different. 5-star dishes have complex simplicity. And that's what you want. You're writing complex simplicity. That goes into pacing as well, you know. So double check your pacing. There's actually a lot more in these categories. I'm going to end it here. But with that being said, yeah, definitely check out the books. Hit me up for beta reads if you want. Or even, you know what, sometimes just go ahead and shoot me your first sentence. Shoot me your first paragraph. Just from that, I could already tell something. You know, I could already tell a lot. I'm getting really good at this stuff, by the way. I don't know where this is going to take me, but I'm definitely getting better as a writer, better as a beta reader. And once you start taking a psychological approach to your writing and understanding it in a deeper way, and learning how to humanize things and learning how to put them in your own words and then have people be able to relate and take it, then you can become a lot better writer. So don't neglect these fundamentals. I think this is going to be a part 1 out of like a part something else video series. I did that like a few months ago, didn't I? Anyways, with something else. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to start that second video now. But anyways, keep on writing and never, ever, ever stop. Ever. Have a good one.